All right, let's talk about the Umbrella Academy because season 4, Umbrella Academy 4 is coming out soon. And I've only just watched the first 3 seasons very recently, so it's still kind of like fresh in my brain. And I just am dying to talk about it because there are things I love, things I wish were better. And I just think it's such an interesting and thought-provoking show. Now, this is going to be a series on my channel. Now, each video in this series from me is going to be important and they're all going to work together because there are some criticisms I have within season 1 that are actually improved upon in later seasons. And there are some things that I really love in season 1 that I think they actually kind of fail later on in season. So I think it's really going to be good to get a full idea of what I think about this show to watch every single video I do. With all that said, let's get into it. I absolutely love that the marketing for each season of Umbrella Academy, it's listed as basically a sequel. It's like a movie. So for example, season 1 is listed as Umbrella Academy 1. Season 2 is listed as Umbrella Academy 2. And I really love it because it gives the idea that each season is actually setting out to tell a sort of story. Yes, obviously this is a show that all is building to a grand conclusion, but each season has a very distinct feel, and the later seasons feel like sequels. They feel like movies rather than like shows that are just pumping out endless episodes. And I really like that. I love that the first season has a really strong identity set in 2019. Season 2 has a really strong identity set in the past, and season 3 has a really strong identity in this like parallel timeline 2019. I just think it's so great, just such an inspired idea. And I really need to praise and give credit to Netflix for just giving this amount of creative control to the creative team because this show is weird. I tried to watch this show years ago with a friend and they tapped out because it was too weird. Like just in the first episode alone, you're dealing with time travel, you're dealing with a young boy who's actually an old man, you're dealing with like a gorilla man, you're dealing with space, you're dealing with like brutal violence. Like there is so much that this show is throwing at you, but in my opinion, I actually think they pull it off incredibly well. I think this first season in particular, weirdly enough, is rated a 71 or a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes compared to season 2 and 3, which are both rocking a solid 90. I think this is absolutely insane because to me, season 1 is the best. Now, season 2 definitely gets close at some parts and actually exceeds it, but as a complete package, especially given how the first season ends, I just think it's like remarkable. I think all these characters are super fascinating. I love all the mysteries that are set up, all these like sweet little details that they throw at you, and they really throw a lot at you. And some of them still haven't been paid off completely, even by the end of season 3. I love the first season. I love this kind of timeless feel. It's really interesting because it's set in 2019, but they avoid things like social media. They avoid things like phones wherever they can. So it has this really interesting like steampunk aesthetic, which carries through into season 2 and 3. I love the art design. I love the sets, and I love how violent this show is too. It's deceptively violent. Now, I do wish some of it stuck with me a bit more and it was a bit more harrowing to watch. I think they do pull their punches slightly, but for the most part, this is a show that really takes its audience seriously. It really treats us like mature viewers. A lot of things are hinted at. There's a lot of showing, not telling, just a lot of really great character writing that you usually don't see in these Netflix shows. A lot of really subtle detailing that I absolutely adore. I love all the characters. I think every single character is just so well thought out and pretty much perfect casting across the board. Like genuinely like unbelievable casting. Everyone from Hargraves to Victor. 5 especially is probably the standout of the entire series in my opinion. Just a phenomenal performance. But the thing that really struck me about this first season is they just go for it. They set up in the first episode that there is an apocalypse coming. They set up that 5 has been time traveling, and they really commit to the bit here. Like a lot of the plot rests on these time travel mechanics, and they go really in depth in it and really spend a lot of time exploring this stuff. On top of that, they set out and they say from the jump an apocalypse is coming, and they commit to the bit. On top of that, the revelation, this sense of dread you start to feel as you slowly realize with the characters that Victor is almost definitely the cause of this apocalypse. It's just really fascinating, and I love that you as an audience are waiting for the shoe to drop. I also love that we are ahead of some characters in terms of what we know. So based on who we are following, we know more than a lot of other characters. For example, we we know what's really going on with Victor and love interest slash gaslighter, and a lot of the other characters don't know. We also know who is hurting one another. It's just incredibly well done, well written, and just captivating TV. So before we continue with today's video, I just want to give a quick word from today's video sponsor, Aura. So as much as I enjoy immersing myself in the world of superheroes and their incredible abilities, I recently had a stark reminder that in the real world, we face a different kind of threat, one that can't be fought with superpowers. I recently discovered something that left me feeling incredibly uneasy. I decided to Google my best friend's name out of curiosity, and what I found was shocking. A data broker site had a vast amount of his personal information readily available for anyone to access. It was deeply unsettling to realize that someone so close to me was at risk due to this information being out there. And then it hit me. If this could happen to him, it could easily happen to me and those closest to me as well. The thought of my personal information being exposed like that made me feel helpless and honestly terrified. That's when I discovered Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura is a powerful tool that helps protect your personal information from falling into the wrong hands. It alerts you when your data is being sold on the dark web or by data brokers, and it automatically removes your information from these sites, giving you peace of mind. In today's digital age, protecting our privacy is more important than ever, with data breaches becoming increasingly common, like the recent AT&T incident where over 73 million customer records were leaked on the dark web. Having a reliable security solution is crucial. Aura provides comprehensive protection, monitoring your accounts, offering fraud alerts, and even helping you secure your devices. I value my privacy and I value yours too. That's why I highly recommend giving Aura a try. You can head over to aura.com/Stannis to start your free 2-week trial of Aura. The link is also available in the description below. Take control of your personal information and enjoy the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're protected online. Thank you again to Aura. Now, before I get to my character by character analysis, I do need to highlight a few things that just didn't quite work for me in season 1 of the Umbrella Academy. So first off, some of the action scenes. Now, yes, for the most part, the action is gritty and brutal and surprisingly violent and really well shot and really well framed. I love that they oftentimes will line up action sequences with pop music. However, sometimes it almost just feels a bit predictable or a bit overdone. I absolutely love movie scenes where they take a super violent, heightened action scene and set it to a really fun song. But unfortunately, as the Umbrella Academy goes on, especially 3 seasons in, I find that this trick started to feel a bit old. I think it was really neat in Five's first action scene where he kills everybody in the diner. That was a really awesome reveal, a great little moment. But in that scene, I just wish we could see more of the action. They had this strobe light effect going on to the point where it was like really well choreographed action, really well shot action, but I couldn't see much of it. And they do this a few times throughout the first season of the show. Later, there is a section where Hazel and Chacha are shooting at Five and he's teleporting throughout the store. And it was so poorly edited that at the time of watching it, I actually thought he'd killed one, if not both of them. And it was only later when they popped up later in the show and I realized that that was just a poorly edited sequence and I just couldn't tell what was going on. On top of that, I do think using the pop songs, it just gets a little tired after a while. There are multiple sequences where it feels like almost a detour that a musical would take, but instead of like singing, they're fighting. Like, for example, 2 characters will be reunited and meet, and instead of just talking, they'll just start punching each other. And it's like, as an audience member, we know that neither character is going to die in this moment. They're playing some upbeat song, and it just starts to feel like a waste of time. I absolutely love action scenes, but for me to really connect with an action scene, I need to feel like someone is in peril. And oftentimes it just feels like the show is like pausing the story just to have a fight scene. And especially if the fight scenes aren't particularly gripping, it can just kind of feel a bit played out and a bit lame. On top of that, even though I said at the start of the video, I absolutely love how weird and out there this show is, sometimes it feels like it's just being a bit like strange just to be strange. I know in the comics, Hazel and Chacha both wore the mask, but I think visually speaking, it felt really strange being translated in live action. I think a lot of the elements they translated from the graphic novel really worked, but I found Hazel and Chacha's masks really quite strange. I never really connected with it, and I think the show knows it wasn't working because they very quickly dropped that as the show went on. The issue I have with this is it's kind of framing Hazel and Chacha as these like Deadpool sort of characters, these like violent but funny and like sadistic people, whereas when they're out of the mask and 98% of their characterization is really serious and clinical and we need to get the job done, And I know maybe you can make the case that like, oh, the mask is when they let loose, but I just find these sequences where they're like dancing or have the masks on really spit in the face of the rest of their characterization. I find it isn't really congruent and doesn't really fit. You know, especially Mary J. Blige's character. She is so like serious and like, we need to get the job done. We need to be efficient. We need to serve the commission. It's just strange that she'd wear these like silly, goofy masks and then like engage in dance. Like, I don't buy it. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. And also the guy in this situation is really like, you know, in love and like contemplating leaving the commission. So it just totally never worked for me. Aside from that, there's some very occasional weird wonky green screen in some time travel sequences, but really the effects in this first season especially are absolutely excellent. So now that all the general stuff is out of the way, I want to go character by character because I find that's where I can really get into the nitty gritty stuff of this show. All right, so let's start with Victor. All right, so Victor was absolutely my favorite plotline in season 1. The manipulation and gaslighting that was going on with that guy that was trying to basically manipulate him into bringing the apocalypse forward was just so interesting. I love that we knew something that Victor didn't, and I love just waiting for the shoe to drop. I thought it was so well executed, and it was easily the most interesting thing from the jump in this show. It felt really human. I loved how patient it was as well. This was really slowly revealed to us over a few episodes, and you were like waiting for it to like escalate and explode. Now, my only issue is, and it's one of my biggest issues with season 1 as a whole, is the way this storyline ended. For me, given how patient and slow burn it was at the start, it felt really rushed towards the end when they basically had that big fight where Victor killed him. The reason I say that is this guy that's been trying to manipulate Victor throughout the first season is just really smart and cunning, and for no good reason he just decides to start roasting Victor when Victor is like the most powerful they've ever been. Like, he literally walks back into the room, starts talking shit, and just gets like exploded and murdered. It was just so weird that someone who was previously so calculated and so smart just like loses the plot and just decides to start talking shit until Victor kills him. While we are on the subject of that weird boyfriend though, I absolutely loved his motivation. Now, oftentimes with superhero content, the villain motivation of like, oh, I was jealous of how powerful you guys are, or I want to be part of the team, really doesn't work for me. It feels really juvenile and silly to put an end of the world plot on that sort of stuff. But I thought the way they pulled it off here was genuinely fantastic. The sense of entitlement that a crazy person would have if they were born on the same day as the Umbrella Academy but weren't born with the gifts, like, incredible. Whoever thought of that, because I've read 2 of the 3 graphic novels that are out so far and it isn't there, just an incredible idea. Like, such a great idea. And I thought everything with his character up until the end was excellent. And I thought Victor, this whole season 1 was really, really good. I found the way that the family talked about Victor though really kind of strange. I know that this show is about family trauma. I know that Victor was treated like shit growing up. Like, I do understand that. I know what the show is trying to tell me, but I kind of agreed with Luther when he was like, yo, we need to like lock her up. He is going to bring on the end of days. And I was kind of surprised that everyone else in the Umbrella Academy, given how ruthless they were and given how already cruel they were to Victor, didn't really get on board with this. Like, I don't think Luther is the bad guy that the internet seems to think he is for thinking it was a good idea to put Victor in a cage. Now, yes, it did not work, but Victor like lost the plot. He murdered Pogo and no one ever really holds on that until season 3, and that's from Allison, who becomes a really unlikable character in that season. But no, Victor by the end of the season was a world-ending threat, an apocalyptic threat, and I think they needed to be treated as such. And it's strange to me that the Umbrella Academy was like so chill, especially when they found Pogo dead. There wasn't really a massive reaction the way I was expecting there to be, and I was waiting throughout season 2 and 3 to really get that, and we never did. It just felt really strange to me that Luther was the only one that was like, yeah, this is what we have to do, especially given the fact that they all team up at the end to try and stop Victor. I don't know, like, I think ending the world is pretty serious, and maybe sometimes there is a greater good, and this is something that the show explores throughout the first 3 seasons. Next, we have Luther. Now, Luther is one of the most disappointing characters I think I've seen in modern television. When he was introduced with his massive stature, I thought he was going to be like this really interesting character that should have been the #1 boy, felt really entitled, was meant to be the leader, and dad never gave it to him, like similar to a Kendall Roy character from Succession. But instead what we got with Luther was just kind of like a wet fart in season 1. Now, admittedly, in season 3, I actually really came to like him, but for the first 2 seasons, I actually felt like the show didn't know what to do with Luther. I was really confused. The only time I really like connected with or was engaged with Luther was when he was threatening to lock Victor away to prevent the apocalypse. I just didn't know what they were going for with him. I found him really underwhelming, not interesting, not funny as well. And I think they couldn't really decide whether he was meant to be a really serious, stoic, misguided character or just a goofy goof joke. And I think by season 3, they very much landed on he is a goofy goof joke. But yeah, for those first couple seasons, I just found his characterization really strange. I didn't really get a massive insight into how he felt about his dad turning him into a gorilla, or how he felt about the fact that he was on the moon, which is eventually the thing that exploded, and whether his dad knew that or not. I was begging for more from his character, and I never really got it. And it's really a shame, because the fantasy sequence where he's dancing with Allison in his like regular body rather than his gorilla body is incredibly interesting and such a great idea on paper, but it doesn't land for me, because I just felt like we did not have enough with Luther, and we didn't get enough insight prior to that moment about how tortured he feels about his gorilla body to really like resonate with that moment. So it just felt a bit strange and kind of lacked the emotional punch that I really think they were going for there. Now, I do really fuck with Luther for taking the apocalyptic threat seriously, and it's actually really interesting to me that 5, who we will get to later, didn't really take Victor being a apocalyptic threat as seriously as he probably should have. It's really strange to me, because he re-enters the timeline and is like, our one goal here is to stop the apocalypse by any means necessary. The world is ending in like 5 to 10 days. And then when it's presented to 5 that Victor is potentially almost definitely the world-ending threat, he like seems to like pull his punches and not really line up with Luther. I found that very, very strange. Next, we have Diego. Diego is a great character, like a really well-conceived character. I think the performance is also excellent. I wish we got more into him. This is an issue I have in all 3 seasons of the show. Diego is a character or a plot line that I am constantly waiting to flesh out. 3 seasons in, heading into the 4th and final season, and I don't think I'm ever going to get the depth from Diego that I really wanted. I never really connected with the initial love interest he had. I thought that plotline was really like rushed and thrown away when she was murdered. I don't really think it informed his character as much as the writers think it did. Now, in saying that, I do really like his relationship with Lila that's explored in season 2 and 3, but as it stands in season 1, he was just lacking a bit of depth. It was a character that I was constantly waiting for his solo episode or for the scene that really sold me on him. And in my opinion, we never quite got that. I think his action scenes are excellent. I think the performance is really good, but a lot of his jokes don't land, and I wish I knew more about him as a person, in my opinion. I do really love his interplay with Klaus, however, and I wish we got more of that as the show went on. Next, we have Allison, easily one of the most interesting characters in the show, especially in season 1. Now, hot take, now this is going to reference season 3, but there is a lot of backlash about her character in season 3, certain actions she takes, how much of an awful person she is. You know, I've seen a lot of criticisms of season 3 online be the fact that it feels like a complete 180 of Allison's character. I have to disagree. I think Allison is a bit of a nasty piece of work from the jump, and I think the show definitely wants you to know that. It is very heavily implied, if not clearly spelled out to the audience, that she has not only rumored her daughter to like get her to sleep and stuff, but also rumored her husband into loving her. So certain actions that she takes in season 3 do not surprise me at all. On top of that, I wouldn't put it past her to also be rumoring the daughter about way more serious things, and she just doesn't have the stomach to admit that to everyone. I think she's a really twisted, nasty character, and not in like a bad way. I think she's a really well-written character, but a tortured character. And I think she does have the potential and the capacity for darkness from the very jump of this show. And I actually think it's really fascinating how kind of twisted and evil she gets in season 3. And I do think the seeds were definitely planted throughout season 1 and season 2. I think what they did with her character is actually really interesting. It's probably my hottest take of the season, that I really like the evolution of her character as sort of a villain within the heroic team. I think it's really interesting. Next, we've got Klaus, the man that can talk to the dead and also eventually becomes immortal. What an incredible character. Absolutely incredible performance, by the way, from Robert Sheehan, who played Nathan in Misfits. He is back again playing another immortal character, but this is absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely adore Klaus. I think it's so interesting. I think he straddles the line of humorous and tragic and sad and heroic just so well. I think everything with him is great. He's absolutely magnetic in every single season he is, and I love that the interplay with him and every other character is that people kind of see him as this loser. He's kind of the burden and the black sheep of the family. He's holding them back a bit. He's seen as a bit of a moral obligation to keep alive and keep healthy. I just think it's so good. Great performance. Love the character. I will go more in depth in him in season 2 and 3 because I think his plot lines get far more interesting in season 2 and season 3. But before I leave Klaus, I think Klaus and Victor are the ones with the most substantiated and in-depth kind of like family-based trauma. People often talk about how this show is all about family-based trauma. And in my opinion, like it absolutely is on paper, but I don't think they go in depth with it as much as they should. However, with Victor, Klaus, and almost Luther in some parts, I think they really do go there and pull it off incredibly well. Next, we have 5. Now, mad credit to Jared Way, because this is like the 3rd or 4th character who I'm going to say just an incredible concept. Like conceptually speaking, 5 is just such a great idea. You know, along with Klaus, along with Luther, along with Victor, along with Allison, these are just all such interesting power sets to give our characters. And 5 is it's just a great performance, first off. The way he carries himself as this skinny schoolboy, but you can tell he's like old and frail and he's just trying to stop the apocalypse. You know, the fact that he's way more mature, way more experienced than anyone around him, the way that he's been in this post-apocalyptic future, the fact that he's working for the commission, just all his plot lines are so interesting and well thought out and just like captivating. I also love that he's like very get on with it. He keeps a lot of things close to his chest. He doesn't really reveal to anyone for quite some time that he works for the commission. He really doesn't give away any information unless he's demanded, and it's just really interesting that we know so much about 5 as a character, but everyone around him in the family doesn't know nearly as much. I love the versions of old 5 we see. I just think it's just such a fascinating character. And I like that 5 has lived such a life that he's experienced love with like a mannequin and now he's just checked out of it. Like he is a really clinical character. Yes, in season 3 he gets drunk and we get some emotional moments, but for the most part 5 is just a clinical, precise and focused character. He is constantly like not impressed with how emotional and erratic the rest of the team are. He is very much focused on the mission of stopping the apocalypse, and he doesn't seem to really want to bother with any other like emotional stuff or family dynamic if he doesn't need to. And I just think it's such an interesting character to have the one that visually looks the youngest be the most like emotionally stoic and cold. Next, we have Ben, who shows up as like a vision and apparition for Klaus. Incredibly interesting. I love that pretty much the only way we see Ben is through Klaus. We only see him interacting with Klaus, so we only really find out about Ben through what people say about him. Super interesting idea yet again. I think what they do with him in season 3, I'm a bit whatever about. I think it feels really strange and also a bit contrived, but I really like him throughout the first 2 seasons of the show and his interplay with Klaus. I think it's excellent. This is another example of a great Umbrella Academy mystery. They still haven't revealed to us how exactly he died, but still a really interesting talking point amongst the fandom. And yet again, just another great idea. One of my favorite things about this show is that they never give you these massive exposition dumps. And if they do it in a very humorous way. Like when they explain what the grandfather paradox is in season 2. Otherwise, characters don't do a whole lot of like explaining things that both of them should already know. You don't get a whole lot of like, hello sister who I haven't seen for 52 years since I got lost in a time vortex. How are you? Do you still use your rumor powers on your husband or not? Like that is not how the show does exposition. You never get lazy exposition in this show. They instead like really slowly trickle stuff out to you, so you have to do some of the legwork, and I think it's really fascinating. And I really love about the show the fact that this oftentimes leads to really interesting mysteries. Everything feels intentional. It doesn't feel like lazy writing. Instead, you're sort of sitting there going, tell me more, like I really want to know. And that is really well exemplified with Ben Hargreaves. All right, next we have Sir Reginald Hargreaves. Now, I do really like Reginald Hargreaves throughout season 2 and throughout season 3. This might be a hot take. I don't know. I was really underwhelmed with Reginald Hargreaves in season 1. I was kind of expecting a superhero version of like Logan Roy. And yes, again, like I was saying, I know that this show on paper is about family trauma. And like obviously a lot of the stuff he does is completely horrific and traumatic, but I don't think he was a super interesting character in season 1. We didn't get too much of him. He just seemed like this plot device. I was genuinely expecting the way they set him up in season 1 that he was going to be like future version of Five, like Five's old self, and there was going to be this massive twist that Five is actually the Five or something, right? Because he was just so thin in season 1 and so not interesting and just really felt like a caricature. And that was fine in season 1 because he wasn't too important, but I'm really glad that in season 2 and 3 they strengthened him up a bit and like beefed him out a bit. But no, in regards to season 1, I was a bit underwhelmed by Reginald Hargreaves. I was really expecting something grittier and dirtier. I was really expecting something grittier or dirtier or just something with a lot more depth, and I never really got from Hargreaves what I wanted from Hargreaves. Next we have Pogo. Incredible effects work. It just has to be said, absolutely fantastic, wonderful effects work, especially for like a Netflix show. Like I could not believe how good so many of the effects in this show were. Pogo looks incredible. And I thought Pogo, it didn't look as good as the older Planet of the Apes movies, the ones from like 10-ish years ago, but Pogo looked better than the apes in the new like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So like go Netflix. Go Umbrella Academy. But Pogo is also just an incredibly good character. Minor ding on the show, I thought his death, while horrific, really needed more time or something. Like no characters ever talk about, and I know they're very busy stopping the apocalypse. But in terms of like raising the stakes, having Victor kill Pogo is very effective. But I genuinely thought they were going to like back out of it or fake it due to how unceremoniously it was done. It was one of the few moments in the show where like the emotion just didn't work for me at all. I was like, can we let this moment breathe a bit? Like let me mourn Pogo, because I should have been really horrified and upset, but it just moved on so far. The death of Pogo, however, does definitely inform Luther and definitely makes me side with Luther in regards to locking Victor away while they figure out the apocalyptic situation tied to Victor. Next we have Grace, the robot mum. Great idea. Yet again, another interesting, fascinating, like just weird idea that the Umbrella Academy throws at you and pulls it off completely. I love that in season 1, and we don't get too much of it moving forward in the show, but in season 1 you get all these really eerie, uncanny moments where the mum starts to glitch. She doesn't handle conversations quite right. She'll have these like blank slate pauses where it's like her CPU's catching up, and it's really eerie and disturbing and like genuinely like can be compared to some great modern horror movies. Like these little moments where she spaces out are genuinely unnerving. Excellent performance, by the way. Whoever is playing her is absolutely crushing it. Like to pull off looking like a robot when you aren't a robot just through your facial expressions and pauses is probably really hard to do and really admirable. So yeah, really like her character. Wish we got more of this version of her. We get different versions of her throughout the show, but this is probably the best one and the most interesting one. I absolutely hate what they did with her character in season 3. Just an utter fucking joke, but we will get there when we get there. All right, next we have Hazel and Chacha. Can they be a bit cringe? Yes, I did not like the scene where they were in like the eye factory and they just started boogieing. I know this show is known for its dance scenes as much as it's known for its action scenes, but it just didn't land for me. It wasn't funny. It was just a bit like, can we get on with it, please? I also don't love the masks that they wear. It doesn't really make sense to me. They are so clearly identifiable. Like it's not doing a good job covering their identity or making them more discreet. It just feels strange. It feels like weird Deadpool humor. I don't really understand it or the motivation behind it. However, when they aren't dancing, I absolutely love Hazel and Chacha. I think they're excellent characters because you really start to like empathize with them and like them, but then they will like horrifically torture someone, especially the guy, right? Like you really start to empathize with him and the fact that he wants to leave the commission and stop murdering people. And you really start to resonate with his romance story with the woman from the diner. However, 2 or 3 episodes earlier, he was like horrifically torturing and murdering the person that Five met at the donut shop. So it's like really interesting stuff they do with their characters. I really like the line they straddle in terms of like morally reprehensible characters, where it's like they are really horrifically awful people, but you really start to like resonate with them. And I found their story just as interesting as some of these storylines going on with the Umbrella Academy. So I think overall they knocked it out of the park, and it's very rare that side villains like this are this interesting. And in my opinion, in terms of interesting adversaries for the Umbrella Academy, I don't think season 2 and 3 ever quite catch up to this the way they did in season 1. I don't think the Swedish villains in season 2 were very interesting. I think the Sparrow Academy in season 3 were utter dog shit, but we will get there when we get there. But yeah, overall, I have a few notes for season 1, and similarly in season 2, I have a few notes. I think each season does some incredible stuff and just falters slightly. But overall, the thing I love about season 1 is it feels like this weird, like Tim Burton movie almost. Like all these weird ideas are presented like really casually, you know, and as an audience, audience member, you're just expected to know and go with it. And I think it's a really compelling television. I appreciate the confidence the showrunners had to just go for it. Now, obviously, like reading this as a graphic novel, it's a totally different experience. I think graphic novel readers, comic book readers, you're used to like really strange, violent, out there ideas on the page, but oftentimes it doesn't translate to screen just as well. And I think all the additions they added in this first season of the show were really smart. Hazel and Chacha coming in this early were incredibly fascinating. All the work with the commission was really fascinating. And I absolutely love that they committed to the world actually exploding at the end of this season. Like the first season ended, and I was like, where do we go from here? Like, where do we go from here? I think it was so well done. I think this is, in my opinion, the Umbrella Academy's best season. However, there are a lot of things in season 2 that I would have a tough time giving up. I absolutely love the time jump, which we will talk about in season 2, but I just think there's something so tight and focused, especially the plotline with Victor and their boyfriend, stalker, manipulator, whatever you want to call it. That was just so well done and fascinating. And in my opinion, I've never been as invested in the show as I was with that plotline. However, season 2 does get close, and season 3 shit the bed a little, but we will get to that when we get to that. So thank you so much for watching part 1 of my 3-part series of Umbrella Academy. I will be doing videos on season 2 and season 3. Please let me know what you think of this video down below. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about next. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day.